And looking at where we left off yesterday, we were on our right triangle trig notes. So I'll open those and just do a real quick review of those things that we just talked about on the Kahoot. So these ratios are ultra important, and it looks like a lot of writing. So sometimes we could just focus on the first couple letters. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. And remember, if we knew those three, then we can always flip them over to get their reciprocal functions. So looking at it that way, I mean, we're talking about 9 letters here, right? So, we really could just write those out, that the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So this may help you remember, and I suppose if you phonetically sounded that out, that would be SOHCAHTOA, right? So you may have heard that expression, SOHCAHTOA. When people talk about trigonometry, you'll hear that all the time. And this is what they're referring to, just the angles of a sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay, so SOHCAHTOA could be our sine opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent opposite over adjacent. And that's going to be really imperative that we remember those, especially doing what we're going to do today. And we applied those to these problems yesterday, and you seem to be doing a really nice job. So what I want to do today is move on to using trig to find a side. All right, so this you should be writing down. We're going to use trig to find a side. And what I mean by that is, remember, we're talking about right triangle trig. So I'm going to draw a right triangle. And let's say in this right triangle, if this angle over here, well, let's make that 38 degrees. That looks about 38 degrees. And here is my right angle. And let's say we knew that the hypotenuse was 52, okay? And that could be meters or yards, or I'm going to keep units out of it at this point because it could be 52 anything. But there is a relation between x and 52. We can find the length of x given a side and an angle. So remember, we talked about the fact that, Pythagorean theorem, we needed 2 sides to find the third side in a right triangle. For trigonometry, if we know a side and an angle, we could find the other side. So in this case, we're going to set up a trig ratio. So I look at the 3 bits of information that are important. I have this angle is what we are looking at. From that angle, x is opposite and 52 is the hypotenuse. So I think, which of my 3 trig functions, I'm only going to use a sine, a cosine, or a tangent. So which of my first 3 trig functions uses opposite and hypotenuse? Well, that will be the sine. So it would be fair to say, and this would be how I would set up my equation, that the sine of 38 degrees is equal to x over 52. So I'm going to solve that for x in just a second. But again, I looked at that angle. That's the opposite. That's the hypotenuse. So the sine of that 38 degrees is x over 52. And so just using my regular algebra, if I multiply both sides by 52, those cancel, and I get x equals 52 times the sine of 38 degrees. Now this sine of 38 degrees has a value, and our calculator, we're going to use our calculator to find that value. We're going to just plug in 52 times the sine of 38 degrees. So why don't you guys open your calculator app? I'm going to do the same. If you're doing a handheld, open that up as well, and I can show you how to do that. It's the same process. So let's open your calculator app. And let's get a new calculator. All right, now, before we do anything, this is ultra important. We need to make sure that our calculator is in the correct mode. So if you hit the wheel in the upper right corner, it will pull up a bunch of settings. The second one down on the right says radian. We do not want that. Okay, for an angle measure, we want that angle measure to be in degrees. So you have to make sure that it's in degrees, and if not, change it into degrees. Otherwise, it will give you all the wrong answers. So that's why I say it's really, really important to do that. Okay, so you change that angle measure into degrees.
Wait, what do we press on the handheld?
On the handheld, you would do on the handheld, you can see this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So up here in the upper right, hit dock. And we're going to have to go down to document settings. And inside there, the second one says angle, and that has to be in degrees. And then you hit make default. All right. Does anybody need me to explain that again? Because it doesn't make any sense to go forward without until we're all in degree mode. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go back then to the iPad version. So if you are in the handheld, then the process from here on out is the same. So we are going to, and I forgot, what are we are doing 52 times the sine of 38. So 52 sine of 38. Now notice I did not put 38 degrees, but the calculator knows it is in degree mode. So if I hit enter, remember in your Inspire calculators, it will give you an exact answer, which is that. You have to click and hold the enter button down and hit the approximation. So it is approximately 32.0. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. So X is approximately 32.0.
Wait, how do you get the approximate?
You on the handheld, yeah. On the app, you hold the enter down. On the handheld, you hit second enter. So you would do 52. I have to hit the trig button here. So then I have sine of 38. If I just hit enter, it will just give me that. I have to hit control enter, and it will give me that approximation.
Wait, how do you get the estimate on the app?
Yeah, let me go back to the app. So on the app, you hold the enter key down. So I would do 52 sine of 38, and I'm clicking and holding on the enter key, and these little wiggles will come up on the left there. So you hit that for your estimation. All right, we are rolling here. Let's do another one. All right, let's take another right triangle. So we'll go this way. That'll be our right angle. Oh, let's see, that looks about 48 degrees. let's say that's x, and that is 28. So first we want to figure out if we're going to use a sine, a cosine, or a tangent. So look at the angle and look at the two sides in relation to that angle. This is opposite and that's adjacent. So what function are we going to use? Which one uses opposite and adjacent?
Tangent.
Yeah, tangent. Very good. So we're going to do the tangent of 48 degrees is equal to x over 28. Okay, because tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I would multiply both sides by 28. So I get 28 times the tangent of 48 degrees is equal to x. And now plug that into your calculator. Check it out and make sure that you know how to do it correctly. Let's round it to the nearest tenth.
Where do we find like the TAN, SIN? Like, where do we find those?
Are you working on the app or on the handheld?
It's on the app.
On the app. They are on in the keyboard top left.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so we got 31.1 approximately. All right, so we're going to keep going here, okay? So let's try another one here.
I don't know if I did anything wrong, but I got 33.6 approximately.
Did you did tangent? I'm sorry, did you do 28 tangent 48?
Yeah.
And you did it on the
App.
app, you said, right? All right, so let's make sure on the app, in the upper right corner, you want to hit the wheel button and make sure that your second one down says degree. Okay, that has to say degree. If it says radian or gradient, it's going to give you the wrong answer. So make sure that's degree and then hit make default. And then let's try it again. 28, tangent of 48. And let me know if you get something different, okay?
Now I got the correct answer. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, so we're gonna do one more here. So let's draw a right triangle. One more for a side. And so here's our right angle. Let's make this 60 degrees. No, let's make it 62 degrees. And let's say that's 41. And let's say that is x. So we first want to figure out if we're going to use the sine, the cosine, or the tangent. So here's our angle. And we have this and this. So what do you think? Sine, cosine, or tangent are we going to use?
Cosine.
Excellent. So it's the cosine because we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So we're going to do the cosine of 62 degrees is equal to 41 over x. Okay, cosine of 62 is the adjacent, which is 41, over the hypotenuse, which is x. All right, so this one's a little different because x is on the bottom, right? I mean, before our x was on top, now our x is on the bottom, just a little bit different in terms of the algebra. So to solve for x here, the first thing I want to do is multiply both sides by x to get it out of the denominator. So when we do that, we get x times cosine of 62 degrees is equal to 41. And now I have to divide by the cosine of 62. So x is equal to 41 divided by the cosine of 62 degrees. All right, so let's go to our calculator and do that. 41 divided by cosine of 62. And we get 87.3, approximately. All right, any questions on those? All right, I'm going to keep rolling, guys, because now, instead of finding a side length, now we're going to find an angle. So next we are going to use trig to find an angle. So this would be an example where we're given two sides and we want to find an angle, not a side length. So let's say we had this triangle here, and we knew the hypotenuse was 71, and let's say that this left side is 20, and we wanted to find that angle now. Well, just like before, the first thing we want to do is figure out what function are we going to use. So, we have an angle, so we'll look at that again, and we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, so that means we're going to use the cosine. Okay, because we have adjacent and hypotenuse. But now our variable's in a different spot. The cosine of x is equal to 20 over 71. Now, whenever we're trying to find an angle, you are going to use the little inverse button. So there will be a cosine with a little -1. That's the inverse cosine. We're going to type in the inverse cosine of 20 over 71. We're just going to plug that into our calculators, and that will give us an angle measure. So to get that inverse cosine, I click and hold the cosine down. So inverse cosine of 20 over 71, and I get about 73.6 degrees. All right, let's do another one. Draw another right triangle. And let's call this angle Y. And let's make the opposite side 33 and the adjacent side 18. So looking at this triangle, I have my angle here. I have opposite and adjacent. That tells me I'm going to use the tangent. So I have tangent of Y is equal to the opposite, which is 33, over the adjacent, which is 18. So whenever you're trying to find an angle, we're always going to use the inverse button. So all we do is type in inverse tangent of 33 over 18, and that will give us our answer. So why don't you do that on your calculator so you know how to do it. And I'll do that, do it on my desktop here. So I would hit trig and inverse tangent of 33 over 18. And I get about 61.4. All right. So we use trig to find a side, and we use trig to find an angle. So I'm going to do one problem that kind of incorporates both of those things. And that might be labeled something like this, where it just says to solve the triangle. Solve the triangle means you're going to use, I'm sorry, you're going to find all the sides and all the angles. So to solve the triangle, here is the given information. We have to be given some stuff, right? All right, so we're going to say that little a is equal to 12, little b is equal to 15, and big C is equal to 90 degrees. So typically the little letters are sides and the big letters are angles. So I'm going to label this ABC because I know that C is 90 degrees. And like our Kahoot, little a is going to be across from angle A, and little b will be across from angle B. All right, so this is our given information. And what we need to do is we need to solve this triangle. So that means, well, the first thing, we could either find this side or this angle first, and it doesn't matter. So, or this angle, it doesn't matter. Those are the three things we need to find. So I'll find angle A just because A comes before B. So if I wanted to find angle A, I know that that's opposite and that's adjacent. So we could say that the tangent of A is 12 over 15. Now, typically I would reduce it, but I don't even have to because I'm just going to plug into my calculator the inverse tangent of 12 over 15, and it will give me that angle measure. So I'm going to do inverse tangent of 12 over 15. And that's 38.7 degrees. So I just wrote that right in the picture. And that's really all the trig I need, because now you remember in geometry, those three angles have to add up to 180, right? So I could do, 180 minus the 90 plus 38.7. To find that angle. So that's going to be 51.3 degrees. And now to find that third side, I could do Pythagorean theorem. I could do 12 squared plus 15 squared equals c squared.
Or can we use the thing that we learned first?
Oh yeah, what would that be? Oh, I'm sorry. You mean use trig to solve it? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could do that too. Let's do that. So if we wanted to, solve for x, I could do like the sine of b would be 15 over x. So the sine of 51.3 would be 15 over x. And so that means x is going to be 15 divided by the sine of 51.3. So 15 divided by the sine of 51.3, oops, it's going to be 19.2. And so we've solved the triangle. We have all the angles and all the sides.
I have a question.
Yep.
How'd you know where to put like the 12 and the 15?
Because it was because it was labeled little a, I put it across from angle A. So the side and the angle, just in terms of their letters, match up. And it doesn't matter if I could have labeled this angle A and then put the 12 there. You just want the small a and the big A to be across from each other, and the small b and the big B to be across from each other.
Okay.
Yeah, anything else, guys?
Would you get the same answer? So you know how you did to get the last side, you did sine of 51.3. Could you have done cosine of 90?
Not cosine of 90. You could have done the cosine of 51.3 is equal to 12 over x.
Why not cosine of 90? Because isn't it like cosine adjacent over hypotenuse?
Correct. But remember, the 90 degrees is here, so there's actually two adjacent sides. So you can't, using right triangle trig, find the cosine of 90. You have to choose one of these non-right angles using the sine, cosine, or tangent.
Right.
Okay? Yeah, anything else? All right, I want to go through a couple of these together, and I really want to focus on this third slide. This is kind of the essence of what we're talking about here. So if you want to please get to that slide, because the top ones, problem 7, those are where we are using trig to find a side. And then the bottom ones, number 8, that's where we're using trig to find an angle. So to do number 7, I have this angle that's opposite, that's hypotenuse. So that means I'm going to do the sine of 21 degrees is equal to x over 12. So that means I do 12 times the sine of 21 to get my x. So I'll do 12 times the sine of 21. And I get 4.3 approximately. So x is about 4.3. For C, I have the 33. I have the opposite and the adjacent. So that's going to be a tangent function. So I have the tangent of 33 degrees is equal to x. Oh, I didn't ask you to do B. I'm sorry. I asked you to do C. My mistake. So that's going to be a cosine because I have an adjacent over hypotenuse. So I have the cosine of 60 degrees is equal to 8 over x. Now, when I solve that for x, I first want to multiply both sides by x. And that's going to cancel those. So that gives me x times the cosine of 60. And then I'm going to divide both sides by cosine of 60. And so my x is equal to 8 divided by the cosine of 60 degrees. So I do 8 divided by the cosine of 60 degrees, and I get 16. So one little shortcut that you could use that students have, kind of relied on sometimes is that when your x is on top, you multiply those two things. And when your x is on the bottom, you're dividing those two things. So that might help you remember that a little bit. All right, to do 8a, we're trying to find angle x. We have an opposite and an adjacent. So that's a tangent function. So I have the tangent of x is equal to 8 over 4. And remember, whenever you're trying to find an angle, we do the inverse. I'm going to do the inverse tangent of 8 over 4. So I'll click and hold and do the inverse tangent of 8 over 4. And I get about 63.4 degrees. All right, last one here, 8b. From my x, I have the adjacent and hypotenuse. So that's a cosine. I have the cosine of x is 7 over 19, because that's adjacent over hypotenuse. So I will do the inverse cosine of 7 over 19. And I get about 68.4 degrees. Okay, any questions on any of those?